maybe go on mute. All right, so let's start out on the eye. We're going to do the eye and the ear today. So this will be in two parts. So chapter 10 is the eye. We'll go right from the beginning and we'll take it right through the end of this chapter here. Let me grab on the PowerPoint. And right here, good. All right. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
All right, perfect. All right, so I even put some pictures of some crazy eyes on here so we can talk about that a little bit. All right, so we'll go right from the beginning with some of the terms that we use for eyes. First of all, periocular. Peri means around and ocular just means eyes. So when you hear the term ocular or ophthalmic, that means we're talking about the eyes. And a lot of people get ophthalmic and otic mixed up because they both start with an O. But the otic is that real short word, and that has to do with your ears. So we're just going to talk about eyes right now. It starts out talking in this book about the orbit. The orbit of the dog and cat is actually, we talked about this in musculoskeletal, it is actually where the eye sits. So remember the dog and the cat, that structure, that bony structure is not closed all the way. It doesn't fuse. Where in the horse, it actually fuses and that eyeball will sit in there. Now in this book, and when you hear the term globe, just like a globe, like the earth, that just means eyeball. Basically is all that means, okay? So when it says that the bony structure surrounds the globe, that's the globe is the eyeball. So when we talk about that term, that's what that means. All right, so this term is really important, this proptosis. So proptosis means that the eye displaces from the orbit. This doesn't happen too often, but you are going to see this. If the dog has maybe an injury or a blunt force trauma, all the ligaments and stuff that hold that globe into that orbit, and because that orbit is not all the way around, sometimes their eye will actually come out of the orbit. Now, does that mean their eye comes out and falls on the ground? No. There's a lot of things that are holding muscles and ligaments and everything that are holding that eyeball in, but sometimes that does happen. Ex-ophthalmic dogs, or dogs that have their eyes that look like they're already sticking out of the orbit, those dogs are a lot easier. It's a lot easier for those dogs' eyes to proptose or come out of the orbit. Super, super painful when that happens. We see that in Shih Tzus, in pugs, in Persian cats. Another thing you have to be aware of too, because of the way they're exophthalmic, where their eyes kind of stick out, when you're doing dentals or they're under anesthesia and you have them at a table with a grate, you have to be very careful that you're not pressing on that eye, because you can displace that eye from the orbit, okay? It's pretty hard to do, you know, if they don't have underlying conditions, but that might happen. So proptosis and exophthalmic. And remember those terms right there. So again, these are some examples of some dogs with those exophthalmic eyes, or that protrude out of the orbit a little bit more than others. All right, so the orbit itself has adipose, which is fat, and loose connective tissue, and that pretty much provides support and cushion for that eye to be in there. When the animal is dehydrated, just like humans, those tissues will shrink, and that what happens is that the eyeball itself will actually sink back into the orbit. So it looks like the eyes are way sunken into the head. And sometimes you can tell, even as a VA, myself as a technician, when an animal's dehydrated, severely dehydrated when they come in, those eyes will be sunken back. Humans do the same thing, okay? And this is an example of a cat that, I'm gonna try to, I know you guys can see this and I don't know how to get rid of this. Okay, I'll figure that out. Oh, now I'm going too far. Okay, so if you guys can see this in this picture, that cat's eyes are sunken back into its orbit. So the eyes should be a little bit more out, kind of meaning that cat is severely dehydrated. All right, so we're going to talk about, we'll first talk about the anatomy around the eye. We'll talk about the palpebrae, or little hair-like things that provide protection, and they protect the anterior globe, or the part you see, basically. So when we talk about anterior and posterior, remember anterior is always to the front, posterior is always behind. So I just remember your posterior, you know, kind of that's your behind. So your posterior behind, that's going to always be the back side. Anterior is always going to be the front side. Okay, now here's where terms come in again. The dorsal and ventral outside edges of the palpebrae are covered with fine hairs, and that's going to be the eyelashes. So dorsal meaning closest to the top, and ventral meaning closest to the belly side. Okay, and those are the eyelashes. The rest of the palpebrae is covered with mucous membrane, and that's going to be the conjunctiva. So it's kind of gross, but I usually do this in class too, is when I like pull my eyelid out or I pull my eyelid down, all this area in between, like if you guys wear contacts and put it in, that area in between there is your conjunctiva. Okay, so when they get conjunctivitis, that just basically means that that conjunctiva in that area is swollen. All right, the sacs of that, where I just pulled out and you kind of saw it like a little sac, like it's holding in there, that's a lot of times where we'll put subconjunctival injections, or we'll actually put eye medications right in the subconjunctival sac, so meaning below that conjunctiva. You go right below and you put it right in there. Okay, so that's what those terms mean there. All right, so this is a little visual for you guys to see right there. So we have our, we're gonna go through some more pictures, so I'll just go through a few things in here. But this talks about your dorsal palpebrae, okay, right along the edge here. And again, that's gonna be your eyelashes, and then your ventral, because that's the belly side. All right, and then this is your dorsal conjunctival sac. So this is the conjunctiva. That's where, again, we're going to put eye medications, and you may pull that eyelid up a little bit. If you've ever put eye drops in or eye ointment, you're going to pull that sac up a little bit so you can actually dump it right in there. And then, of course, this is going to be your ventral palpebrae right there. And we'll talk about the other ones in a second. All right, so the palpebral muscles. You actually have muscles on your eyelid that allow you to open and close the eyelid. Most of that is voluntary. And when the animal is under anesthesia or the animal is deceased, those muscles will actually relax, and when they're relaxed, it's open. That's why when animals die, their eyes are open, because it actually takes the muscle to come down, to contract, to actually close the eye. So just kind of know that those muscles control that. Most domestic animals have what they call a third eyelid. That third eyelid is called a nictitating membrane, and you have to remember that term, nictitating membrane. So if anybody has animals, I'm sure most of you do, and they are under anesthesia, maybe tranquilized, or maybe even sick, that third eyelid or the nictitating membrane will come out of the corner, the nose corner, and then it'll come up. That corner is called the medial canthus, and that's right where that nictitating membrane sits. We don't have one of those. If we did, every time we got sick, it would come halfway across our eye. So if you see something like almost grayish come across their eye, it's kind of like a gray skin color, that's their third eyelid. Okay, the nictitating gland is also where there's tear production, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so, whoops, and go back. I'm trying to get that. Can you guys see the square in the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get that to go away, and I don't. Oh, it's going away.
Sometimes it fades.
Yeah, it'll like
Yeah.
fade it
I
now.
thought that was me.
No, it says please move this window away from the share
Yeah.
application.
I actually tried moving it one time.
Well, I think I have to do that, but
Yeah.
oh, maybe this. I don't know. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just trying to. I'll figure this out, and it will go away. I think every time somebody comes in, it pops up. It should go away though. All right. So if you see this, I know you can only probably see one eye, but that's going away now. Good. Okay. In the medial canthus, remember medial's towards the middle. You're going to see that third eyelid come up. Now you can't even see on the one eye. You can't even see that dog's eyeball. Sometimes when they have corneal ulcers or they have irritation in the eye, that will also cause that third eyelid to come up. So that's a protection for that. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about tear production, and that's called lacrimation. So lacrimation happens, most of it happens in that nasolacrimal apparatus. It's right in that medial canthus or near it. The lacrimal gland is what produces most of the tear film in ourselves and in animals. Okay, so near the medial canthus, which is right by that nose there, on each of the palpebrae that's there, there's what they call a punctum. And what that is an opening to the nasolacrimal duct. So that is why when you cry a lot or your eyes are tearing, it actually comes into your nose and you have to blow your nose, because that opening there will allow it to drain out. Okay, so that's what drains out excess tears. It drains it right out into your nose, and that's normal. If any of you have ever gone to the eye doctor and had to have a tear staining, or that yellow, greeny type stain they put in your eye, it will actually come out of your nose, and it'll come out of your nose like a bright green color, bright yellow color. It's kind of crazy because it goes right into that lacrimal duct. Some puppies are born with that opening, that punctum closed, and they actually have to take a lacrimal needle and put that through and flush so they can open that duct up. Babies have that too. Human babies, sometimes they'll have to clean those ducts out too, so they can actually have drainage, because you need to have drainage in your eyes. Tears have two components. We have a watery portion and an oily portion. All right, that'll be more important when we talk about diseases. You're going to see one of these diseases where the water part isn't there and it just leaves oil. So you have to have both of them to continuously flush that eye out, so you don't get foreign debris in there. Okay, oily provides long lasting, just like if you would put ointment in your eyes. It's kind of the purpose of that. All right, so this right here just gives you a visual. I know that crazy box is there. The lacrimal gland is right, there's one right here, and there's also one right here. So this is the punctum right here. That's where the hole is. There's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you may see the veterinarian take a needle. It's not really sharp at the end, but it fits right into these ducts, and it will actually flush it. And then this goes right out into the nasal area here. This nares is just the opening, that hole. It's not that big, but that's where they flush that out. All right, so again, talking about the tears there, the tears lubricate, moisturize, they protect the tissues of the cornea, the conjunctiva. Blinking helps move the tears all over the place. So blinking is good. That helps move everything out of there. The watery components produced by the lacrimal gland, there's other glands that are around the eye that are going to produce oil, and they kind of just mix together and they help that eye out. Okay, so again, the tears will flow down over the eye, drain out through the lacrimal duct. When they get to the nasal passages, they're going to flow out with the rest of your nasal secretions, or they're just swallowed. All right, and that's just a normal process of the things of the eye, of the drainage of the eyes. This is an important term too. It's called epiphora, and that's overflow of tears on the face. And if anybody has seen or has a white dog, when they're white, they get a discoloration on right between their eyes. It's like an orangey brown type thing, and that's from the normal tears, but sometimes certain breeds have overflow, and it'll actually discolor light colored skin or light colored fur right in that area. All right, sometimes that's due to a blockage, sometimes it's just due to the makeup of the tears. All right, so epiphora, and that, I know it's going right across that little Bichon or poodle right there, but this is what it looks like as far as in the eye, in the medial canthus of the eye. All right, so we're going to go over start going into, we got the periocular, we got outside, we're going to go starting into the globe now. So the globe is supported by muscles, by extraocular muscles. Okay, so that's just your eyeballs. These muscles are attached to your sclera, and the sclera is the white portion, and we'll talk about that. Well, it's right there too, the white part of the eye, and that is going to be your toughest part of the eye. That's the toughest part of the eye, that white. So sclera is the white. So looking in the mirror, see the white part of the eye, that's your sclera. That's made up of really tough fibrous tissue. That's why it's the toughest part of the eye, and it forms the bulk of the globe. Okay, so it's gonna be support for a lot of those other structures that are in the eyeball. All right, and that's an example there. So you have your cornea on the anterior portion, and then you have your limbus, the second part of it here, which we'll talk about that in a second, and then you have your sclera. So the sclera makes up a big part, but look at this bone. This is the orbit. So really, you're only seeing this portion of the eye. The eye goes all the way back, and the muscles hold that eyeball in, the extraocular muscles. Okay, so a lot of stuff is happening right in this area right here. We only see just a little bit of that eyeball. All right, so let's talk about, again, the globe. The most anterior structure of the globe is the cornea. So remember, you got to remember your terms. Anterior is front, posterior is behind. So the part you're going to see, the very first part is the cornea. The cornea is clear, super, super clear. It's dome shaped. It's, again, transparent. It's avascular, meaning that there's no blood supply there, but it's made up of a lot of different things. There's actually 4 layers. We're not going to worry too much about naming the 4 layers. Just know that that cornea has 4 layers. So when an animal comes in and it has an ulcer or a hole in the cornea, the treatment's going to depend on how many layers it went through. There's going to be 2 layers that are very thin, then there's going to be a thicker layer, and then there's going to be a layer in the back that if it damages that layer in the back, there's a good possibility that the eye might have to be removed. So 4 layers of that, and it explains the layers in here. You have your squamous, your outer layer, you have your stroma, and then you have your descendants membrane. Okay, and again, we're not concentrating too much on the names of it. Just know that there's 4 of them. Okay, so that's a little visual there for you. This is the anterior chamber here, so we're not going to worry about that too much right now. But this is your first layer, your endothelium, and then there's your descendant membrane. Then there's your stroma and your epithelium. Okay, so this is backwards. Sorry. This is your cornea right here, and your epithelium. Your stroma is going to be your middle layer right here. That's your thickest layer. Descendant and endothelium right here. So very, very, seems kind of weird, that cornea, but you got that 4 layers in there. All right, although you can see through it, and it really doesn't look like anything, but I'm telling you, and you guys, anybody here on this call that's got an eyelash stuck in their eye, or even the teeniest little speck of something in your eye, it hurts. It's super, super painful. Anything in the eye, and we talked in the nervous system about nociceptors. There's a lot of those types of nerves in the cornea. So anything on that eye is going to be extremely painful. Okay, animals, people, anything. Animals have a little bit higher threshold of pain in their cornea than we do, but it is still painful for them. All right, so moving on, and again, at the end of this PowerPoint, I'm going to have you take that scrap piece of paper and we'll go through these really quickly so you kind of know the order of how it goes back from anterior to posterior. But the cornea, or the anterior chamber, is in the back of that cornea, and I'll give you a visual in a second. So we talked about the cornea. Right in back of it is the aqueous, or the anterior chamber, and inside that chamber is a fluid, and that fluid's called aqueous humor. So you kind of have to remember the aqueous. So anterior, aqueous, A and an A. So that fluid all floats around in there, okay? In the back of that chamber with all the fluid is your color. You're gonna see the color of your eye. That color is your iris, okay? So you have your cornea, you have your anterior chamber, and then you have your iris. That iris is actually what opens and closes the color part to make your pupil get bigger or smaller. Okay, so the pupil is that black part. That black part's already there, and it's either a circle or it's either like a globe, it's either vertical, horizontal. It depends on what breed. Humans is circle, dogs is circle.
I have a question about that for people. Like, people always tell me I have big pupils, and so there are times, especially in the younger years, where people are like, "Are you stoned?" And my whole family, even my sister, we just have big pupils. And that
could be a genetic thing. That could be just a genetic thing.
I mean, yeah. So I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not on drugs, so.
Don't know why I got big. And animals, you'll see the same. You'll see some breeds of animals too that just seem to have these ginormous pupils. But as we know, like some of the color part is what opens and closes. That helps you to see.
Well, and I have blue eyes, so it's like really noticeable to people.
Yeah, and part of it is that it's the color contrast. Might be
like I'm jealous of brown-eyed people. They wouldn't have to deal with that.
Yeah, that's true. You know, it could be like a color contrast, and then the color of your hair and the color of your skin, and it just appears that your pupils may be bigger, but they're really not. It's just the color contrast.
Okay.
You're going to see that in animals too. Like I said, the different pupils. I actually have some pictures of some different pupils so you can see them. So remember that iris is your color, and the pupil is what's that black that's behind it. okay, the center of it. So this is, hopefully that box stays away. So some different colors that you can see in the eyes, some different pupils. So as you see, the one on the left is a dog, and that's kind of a normal dog color. Eye is the brown, like a brownish yellow goldy color. And then you have the cat on the right, and you notice the pupils are vertical. So they're not round, they're not horizontal, they're actually vertical. And usually animals that are super high prey or that are nocturnal in hunt, it's for vision, for quick vision in and out. And that's why their pupils are vertical and not round or something else, because they're natural hunters. Now I believe big cats though, like the lions and tigers, I believe theirs are round. I'm not sure why theirs are like that, but I think some species of tigers and or breeds of tigers and lions are the other way around. But our domestic cats, though, are usually vertical like that. And then, of course, you have the beautiful husky. On the bottom, I always like to put the blue eyes in there because we always know them as having blue eyes. And then does anybody know what the one on the right is?
Horse.
On the bottom?
A goat.
No, but the goats have the same.
A lamb?
No, it's bigger.
Sure.
It is a farm animal.
Horse?
Horse or cow?
Yeah, it's a horse. It's a horse. That's a horse. So horses' pupils are always oblong shaped like that. So that's kind of different. They still have the iris. They still have a pupil, but the eyes are the pupils are oblong, and part of it has to do with their lateral version and their monocular version. Because we're binocular, we see with both of our eyes straight, where they see more off to the side. So any animal it's kind of cool that the body, depending on the species and how you have to live, that's how your eyes will adjust to that too.
The best way to describe that is like if you put your hands right in front of your face over your nose, that's how a horse will see. So they can't see directly in front of them, but they can see on the other sides.
On the sides, yep. And if you picture a horse too, where are their eyes? Their eyes are set off to the side. So that's where they see, better. And the monocular, because they can't see that part. That's their blind spot is right there. Where our blind spot, where we don't have receptors, is in like on the sides, your peripheral vision. You're going to lose your vision on the side. All right, so it's talking about that iris contracting and making your pupils bigger and smaller. And we talked yesterday about parasympathetic and sympathetic. So sympathetic means that your body feels sympathy for you, so it wants you to see more and be bigger. Your sympathetic nervous system will actually relax your iris to make your pupil bigger so you can see. Usually when you're not panicked, that happens naturally in dark. So when you're in the dark, your body will, or your iris will actually relax, and that will help your pupil get bigger, and you can take in more and you can see more. In the contrast, when you're in a very bright light, your iris will actually close to protect that pupil and protect the back of your eye, and it's gonna take that glare away or the brightness away. All right. Okay, so directly behind that pupil is going to be your pupil and iris, I should say, is going to be your lens. So you have a lens, and if you think of like a lens on a glasses, or actually to me it looks more like a marble, like a flat marble. That lens is what's going to reflect light, and that lens should be what they call a shape of like a biconvex, and it's very elastic, meaning that it's going to expand, it's going to bend, it's going to do all different things. Now when people are nearsighted or farsighted, it's because something's happening in that lens that's making them where they can't see correctly. It's something wrong in that lens. Myself, I have astigmatism very, very bad in both eyes, and it's because my lens, it should be a pretty round shape. Mine's more like a football, so that doesn't reflect light. So when it does do its bending and moving, it's not doing it the way it should be. Therefore, I can't see very good. I can't see very good close up or far because mine are so bad. But that's your lens. That's responsible for that. Okay, and your photoreceptor cells. And that's the one that lets you see near or far. All right, so the lens is connected to what they call a ciliary body by little suspensory ligaments. And again, this is really, really, really tiny. And those ciliary bodies basically are, and those ligaments are responsible for focusing. They're the ones that kind of move your lens around so you can focus in on something and actually see. When the animal's actually looking at something really close, those muscles will contract, and allow that lens to take its more natural round shape. So if you can't see close, that means there's something going wrong in that lens, in those contractions of the ligaments, or so to say. And it happens in animals too. All right, so opposite then for seeing distant, those muscles will relax, and that'll allow that globe to pull the lens into to be pretty flat, so you can see actually distant vision. All right. All right, so behind that, so we got that far. So behind that then is going to be what they call your posterior chamber, and that is filled with vitreous humor. That's the watery liquid there. So we have anterior chamber at the front with aqueous. We have the anterior chamber towards the back, and that's going to be your vitreous. The vitreous humor helps maintain the shape of the globe, which I'll show you a picture in a second. The light passes through that on their way back to the back of the eye, and that's where a lot of your vision is going to be produced. So if you choose the vision pathway, again, I'm going to give you these steps, and once you get past this vitreous humor, that's where all kinds of crazy stuff happens here, and gives signals to the brain, and you actually are going to see, and that's part of that visual process. So retina then, the back of that vitreous humor, that's where actually the images are going to be formed. And if you've had any kind of anatomy, you know that when the images actually go to the retina, they're upside down, and your brain is the one that has to flip it back up. Okay, so it's a lot of nervous system stuff that goes on in the back of that eye too. All right, so inside of that retina, there's a lot of interior things that happen inside that retina too. There's photoreceptor cells, and what they're called is rods and cones. So if you've had anatomy before, you probably heard those terms before. The rods actually will help, they're very sensitive to light. They don't have any, as far as your color, seeing colors, they're just more of making sure that your eye does what it needs to do for light, and it's getting that real clear image in. Your cones, on the other hand, are responsible for color and detail. So both of those photoreceptors, kind of like if anybody's had photography and you're dipping it in all the solutions, your rods and your cones kind of give you that detail and color, okay, to get that photo to come out the way it needs to. So with that said, rods and cones, so cones have to do with color, rods have to do with light, sensitivity to light, and you've heard before that dogs and cats don't see color. Which ones of the rods and cones, which ones don't they have very much of?
Cones.
Yes, the cones. So that's the difference. Now animals see color. Dogs and cats see color. They just don't see the detail and vividness like we do, because they don't have enough cones to make it like that. You said
rods can see light and cones can see color?
Right. Rods are responsible, and they're sensitive to light. Yeah. So they will get your image through the light. The cones are going to be more for color and detail. Yeah. Yeah, so certain breeds have more cones than others. Birds, for one, birds have a lot more cones than pretty much any species. So that is why birds have these beautiful colors, because that's part of their mating thing too. And that's how they know who the male is. The more beautiful and vibrant they are, they attract more females. So and they have a ton of cones, and they're very sensitive to that. So that's the difference between those. So those are your photoreceptors. So the rods and cones, again, have different shapes, different functions. There's different types for different colors. And again, as far as the rods go, they don't detect color or detail. They're just basically for bright light and dim light vision. And then the cones are going to be more of your detail and colors. And there's different shaped cones, and there's different size cones. And like I said, it's all for different colors and different things. So people that are color blind are missing certain types of cones in their eyes. And I know that it's really more prevalent in men as far as humans go. So for some reason down a genetic line, the cones didn't develop the way they were supposed to in that specific genetic line. All right, so just kind of envisioning, now we got our rods and cones in that retina. Inside those rod and cones, they're embedded in what they call actually a choroid tissue. So the choroid tissue is important because animals are a little bit different than us, especially nocturnal animals have a little bit different as far as what's in their choroid. There's two different types of pigments in there. There's a tapetum nigrum, and there's tapetum lucidum. Okay, so those are the two pigments inside that choroid that hold those rods and cones. So you got to remember those two terms. Tapetum nigrum, tapetum lucidum. So nigrum means black carpet, and lucidum means luminous carpet. So luminous would mean bright, you know, kind of bright and just vibrant. So you got to kind of remember them that way. So the tapetum lucidum is found mostly in upper central regions of the inner surface of the eye. It's also found a lot, more than us, in the dog and cat. So it's designed in the dog and cat to amplify incoming light when it gets really low light, like nighttime, especially cats, because cats are nocturnal, they're out, they're hunting at night. So that when you're driving down the road and you see those crazy little whoop, there's two little things in the road and it's white, kind of bright, that's actually what you're seeing is in the choroid, you're seeing their tapetum lucidum. You don't see that in humans. You just see that on usually, you know, like the night animals. And that's in there for a purpose, for them to see better at night. Okay, that's what this explains right here. In us, we don't have that. We don't have that tapetum lucidum, but what we're gonna see is, what do you guys see when you, sometimes in people's eyeballs when you take pictures? What do their eyeballs come out? What color?
Red.
Red, yes. So that throws off, the nigrum throws off more of the red color. So I'm going to, okay, this just explains kind of what we've been talking about a little bit here. I don't want to jump past this slide, but I'm going to show you some pictures. So we talked about the red. The whole choroid is in between the retina and what they call the sclera. So we talked about the sclera. And then this is where it gets kind of confusing. You got to kind of envision it. The choroid is also part of the uvea. Okay, and that provides a lot of the nutrition, the uvea, to the eyeball. Because again, everything in the body needs nutrition. It needs a blood flow. It needs something that comes in it that makes it thrive. Okay. All right. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we understood some of this too in the eye. I want you guys to have a visual in that dumb box. I will figure that out eventually here. Okay, so I know you can't see this, but the cornea, we talked about the cornea being the outside. Okay, that's the one with the 4 layers. Okay, then we're gonna go to our anterior chamber. That's what this is with the aqueous humor. That's your anterior chamber. That's all fluid in there. Okay, then your iris, and you remember the iris is your color. So you got 2 sides right here because you gotta have that little peephole because you have your pupil, and you really can't see it. It doesn't label it on here, but your pupil's right there. That's where your pupil is here. And that's actually the lens. Remember that's for near and far, that lens will bend. These are the ligaments that pull, that contract and relax, and that's what's gonna help you see near or far. This right here, and this is why I said it holds the shape of the eye. Oh, I lost my mouse here. Oh, here it is. This is going to hold the shape of the eye. This is actually your anterior or your posterior chamber, and this has the vitreous humor. So as you see, and again, this is all behind the orbital bone. You're not seeing this visually on the outside, and this is going to have all your fluid there. Behind that fluid, you're going to have your retina, and that's, remember, where the picture, the image is going to be formed as your retina. And again, it's all the way around. That retina contains your rods and cones, which there's not anything visual for that here, but your rods is going to be the light, your cones is going to be the color. All of those are contained within the choroid, and that's this right here, that black line. So you have your retina and you have your choroid, and that's where your choroid is also going to have your tapetum nigrum, your tapetum lucidum. Remember, lucidum, that's where you're going to have that glowing in the dark of the eyes for the animals. And then you're going to have your actual sclera, and this is the white of the eye. So it goes all the way around, that white of the eye, sclera. And when you look at your eyeball, you're thinking, wow, I see a lot more white than, you know, that shows on this picture. But again, this is like a cross image of the picture of your sclera. All right. Any questions on that so far? All right, let's move on. Oh, here's the pictures I had for you. So you have that dog on the left there with the crazy eyeballs. And again, that's the tapetum lucidum. So next time you're driving and you see that, you can just impress everybody and say, oh, I see that dog's tapetum lucidum. They'll go, what? And you're just smart. You just know that. This right here, human eyes, because we don't have that pigment in our eyes. And this right here, this little crazy cat right here, we got one eye that actually has the tapetum lucidum and one eye that doesn't. And if you notice too, that eye is blue. So this cat, that's just the way this cat is, as far as the eyeball goes, that's just the way this cat is genetic wise. And white cats with blue eyes have, a lot of times they're deaf. So there's a lot of genetic things that follow that too. That's kind of, I thought that was kind of interesting. Plus the cat's ears are crazy, and I thought that was a cool picture. All right, so as far as tear flow and aqueous production, or actually this isn't tear flow, this is actually the liquid. So we'll talk a little bit about the liquid that's in the eye. So we have the aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. So the aqueous humor, again, remember that fills the anterior chamber. That is always constantly being produced and is drained in the eye, and it gives nutrients to the cornea. So that's very important. It also helps maintain the shape of the cornea. It's pressurized, so that's called intraocular pressure. And those of you that have had terminology, you know that intra means within. So that's actually your eyeball actually has pressure in it. That's what's holding that part of that up. Okay, so we won't talk too much about the production of that fluid, but what it does is it's a constant flow, and it's a constant one-way flow, and it's always flowing. When that flow gets interrupted, whether it's too much, it's leaking out, or that pressure backs up and it keeps going up and up and up, there's diseases that can happen with that. Okay, so we'll talk about that when we get to the end of the chapter here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the visual pathway, and this is where you're going to have to do your poem or story or whatever you want to do with that. And again, at the end, I will kind of break these through really quickly so you can write them down so you at least know the order that it goes in. So again, that light's passing through the cornea. It's going to go into your anterior chamber. The cornea or the aqueous humor, all that liquid is going to refract or bend, and that's going to bend that light over to the pupil, okay, the iris. So that iris is going to contract or get that light to come in. The pupil will control that volume of light. So again, that pupil's controlling what comes in. If the pupil's huge, all that light's going to come in. If the pupil's small, there's not going to be a lot of light coming in. As it passes through that pupil and the lens, those ciliary muscles are going to focus the light on the back of the eye. Okay, that's called a fundus. We're not too worried about that term right now. And because that lens is biconvex, the image of the fundus is actually upside down. So that fundus part will actually, and the liquid will actually turn that right upside down, that lens will, okay? The light will pass through the retina, so now it's all the way in the back of the eye, strikes that tissue layer, and that's where all your rods and cones are. Okay, that photochemical reaction then will send neural impulses to stimulate those rods and cones that will then, rods and cones will say, hey, sensory nerve, the retinal nerve, I need to transmit this to the brain. We're going to go now to the optic nerve, and we're now going to go to the brain. So there's a lot of stuff happening. Okay, rods and cones, it'll synapse to that sensory nerve fiber, which will go to the optic disc, which goes to the optic nerve. The nerves knock on the brain and say, hey, we need a picture over here. And again, this is all happening like this, because right now I'm looking at this. I can see this clear as day. So it's happening at a very fast pace. Okay, it's going to arrive in what they call the visual cortex of the cerebrum. Remember, we talked about the cerebrum yesterday, and it's gonna actually get that image from there. Right in that cortex, that image is going to be flipped upside down. So if you can imagine, if something's wrong in that in the nerve fibers or the optic nerves, that's where that vision gets interrupted. So that's why it's really important for, especially eye injuries, that we make sure that that optic nerve is attached. Because if that optic nerve is not attached, there's no way you can get any kind of signal to the brain to actually see. So that's how we know sometimes if an animal will never see again or a human will never see again. And they always want to make sure that those nerves are still connected there. Okay. All right. So again, this whole process needs that photochemical reaction in the rods and cones to be able to send all those synapses and all the crazy stuff up to the brain. When the eyes are used together, which we just talked about, it produces binocular. So in the classroom, when you get in there, we actually have a microscope with two lenses, and that's binocular. That means you're seeing through both eyes, okay? Monocular then is going to be when you're seeing through like the one. That's your lateral vision that you have on some of these animals that have lateral. They're seeing only kind of one eye at a time. They can see both eyes together, but it's not a really wide margin of aversion, okay? Binocular, depth and distance. And again, that placement of the eyes on the animal's head is going to determine whether they see depth and distance very well. Animals with that more frontal position, again, have that binocular vision, a little bit better vision. Animals with the lateral do not have that binocular, which is why the horse has that blind spots directly in the front and directly in the behind, because their eyes aren't working together because they can't see that. Okay. Monocular, peripheral, everybody knows what that is. When you go for your, well, we can't right now because it's closed, but the Secretary of State, and they put your eyes in there, and then you have to tell them when that little red dot comes up, that's your peripheral vision. Because we have peripheral vision, there's going to be a blind spot that we have in our peripheral vision. Okay, that's right at the area of the retina that doesn't have any receptors. So there's an optic disc that's right there for us monocular people or animals that we're not going to be able to see on certain parts of the side. Okay. All right. So again, we talked about animals only seeing in black and white. They do have both those rods and cones. They just don't have as many cones as we do. Okay. So rods will transmit black and white images. Again, the cones are for the colors. So they do contain both of them. So I'm going to go down here. I do have a picture of it back here a little bit. So in appropriate lighted situations, animals can perceive some color. Again, I talked about the birds having abundant cones in their retinas, so they see color quite well. And again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that males are super colorful and they get females that way. All right, so that's the eye. We'll talk a little bit about diseases, and then we'll take a little breather here, and we'll start talking about the ear. So as far as visual impairment, lots of different things can cause visual impairment or blindness. The visual pathway alone is so complex. As you see, we were talking about it. There's lots of stuff that happens there. There's tons of ways that it can affect that eye. When looking at ways the light enters the eye, it can begin at the very first point, or the cornea. If this cornea becomes injured or inflamed, the transparency will be lost. So the visual, whatever you're seeing, so picture your, like your windshield, and you don't have your windshield wipers on, and it's snowing or raining or sleeting super hard and you can't see, your transparency is not there anymore. So if your cornea, first of all, can't even get the light to come in or the image to come in, your brain's not gonna pick it up. So the cornea is going to be your first thing. Keratitis, this is an important term because it makes no sense to cornea. It's one of those Latin Greek terms that we just have to memorize. Keratitis is actually inflammation of the cornea. It's not corneitis, it's keratitis. It's just what they call it. Okay, super painful. Again, remember we talked about how painful and how the nociceptors, there's a lot of sensory nerves right in that the cornea itself. So super, super painful. When the eye has edema or fluid buildup in the stroma, which is that thickest layer, it will actually make the eyeball look like a bluish gray color. And does that mean the animal's blind? It does not. It just means there's swelling in there, and we need to get that swelling down. Okay, entropion and distichiasis are two common disorders that lead to inflammation of the cornea or keratitis, and we'll talk about both of those just a little bit. Okay, so entropion and distichiasis, that's how you say both those terms. So this is entropion. So entropion is actually just inward rolling of the eyelid, and if you can see on that picture, I know the box is showing it, but it's actually on the bottom lid, so you can kind of see that, where the eyelid and the eyelashes actually roll in towards the eye. So you can see, like, every time the animal blinks, the eyelashes are rubbing against that cornea, and they can get corneal ulcers or injuries that way. Makes sense. Distichiasis is actually a double row of eyelashes. So again, imagine that your eyelashes, and then you have a row of eyelashes underneath it, and every time you blink, it rubs against your cornea. It's very annoying. There's surgical fixes for both of those. Entropion, it's almost like cosmetic surgery where you flip the eyelid back out, and the double row of eyelashes, they can actually burn those off, that second row, so it's not irritating that cornea. Ectropion is the opposite of entropion, so en meaning in. That is just the rolling out of eyelids. So as you see on certain breeds, they typically can have that anyways because they have droopy eyes and their conjunctiva showing. Ectropion, though, is an excess. So as you can imagine, all the debris and stuff gets stuck in those conjunctival sacs, and they can have some issues that way too. All right, this is another mouthful one here. It's called keratoconjunctivitis, or KCS. That is when the lacrimal glands, because remember the lacrimal glands produce that watery portion and the oily portions from the other ducts and glands that are on the eye. When the lacrimal glands don't produce water, you just have too much oil. So if you can imagine yourself like blinking and you have all this oil or Vaseline on your eyes, but no water to wash it off, it'll build up. As they blink, it keeps building up into the corners of their eyes, and then it hardens, and that they can get corneal ulcers that way too. When they get this disease, it's not curable. It's something that the owner has to put medication in the eyes for life, because they lose that ability to produce water in the eye. And it's a lifetime treatment, and they have to clean the eyes out all the time. And this is an example. You may see this. It kind of looks like a dog that has an upper respiratory, but this is actually a dog that has keratoconjunctivitis. And that's just the oily portion. It's building up because there's no watery portion. So this is that bluish color I was talking about. See, that stroma portion of the cornea is actually swollen and has edema in it. So it's giving that eyeball the appearance of being like a bluish gray. That can go away if we take that swelling out of there. Because remember, the cornea is see-through. So there is 4 layers, but that stroma layer is very inflamed, and that's why you're seeing that bluish color. All right, the most common structure to interfere with light is going to be your lens, and I'm sure everybody's heard of cataracts. So what happens with cataracts, the pupil itself is just going to appear white. So imagine a marble, a white marble, or you can kind of picture that lens that's moving back and forth. It actually just hardens and turns white color. So every time in the iris of the eye, when you're seeing that lens in there, it's going to be absolutely white, totally not see-through. Okay, so you can remove that portion in the lens. You can actually remove the cataract. The animal can have that surgery done, but the animal can only have that surgery done if they can actually see after that. So if there's another underlying condition that gave them the cataracts, maybe their retina is displaced, or their nerve is not working anymore in the back of the eye, they're not going to get that communication, so they're not going to see anyway. The cataracts don't hurt them. They just become blind. They can't see with them, okay? So the retina itself, way in the back of the eye, can be damaged in a couple different ways. There's a disease called progressive retinal atrophy, PRA. So think of that retina. Over time, it's going to deteriorate. Okay, that's what that is. It's just deteriorating. So remember, that retina is where everything gets reflected. That's where your vision, that's where it is. It goes right to that. It's like your camera. Okay, so if it deteriorates and there's nothing there, there's no image there, then the animal is going to become blind. Night vision is usually the first to go, because as the disease progresses, that tapetum lucidum will become very hyper-reflective. So they won't be able to see as well outside, and they get very hesitant. So taking your histories, if you have an older dog, it doesn't even really have to be old, but all of a sudden they don't want to go out at night, or they're overstepping, that maybe they're not sure of where the step is on the deck to go outside when it's nighttime. These are indications that this dog may be going through some of these problems. There's certain breeds that are prone to this than others. So, if you have that certain breed that's going through these problems, the veterinarian's probably going to look at this disease. Okay, this disease, again, is progressive. There's no cure to it. These dogs will eventually go blind. Some of them are blind. I've seen dogs with PRA that are only 1 or 2 years old, and they go blind at 1 or 2. It's not painful. It's not something we can cure, but they can still live with this. Their other senses will become more active. Your smell, stuff like that, hearing, they're going to have better of those. So these are some breeds that are prone. The top left, we have an English Cocker Spaniel, the Mini Schnauzer, your American Cocker Spaniel, your Labradors, and your Poodles. All are very prone to PRA. So that's something you want to look at in history too if you're getting them. All right, so retinopathies, again, the diseases in the retina. They can also be secondary to something. Uveitis, inflammation of that uvea, remember where the choroid is? That, a lot of times in equines and horses, it's called moon blindness, that uveitis. It is progressive. They can lose their vision, and it's super, super painful. Okay, retinal detachment is actually when that retina actually detaches from the back of the eye. That can be common with the uveitis. So we have to get that treated right away. So basically anything with the eye, you need to treat that right away. Anything with the eye needs to be treated as an emergency. Because once you lose that vision, or that pathway. There's nothing you can do to get it back. So very, very important to get those dogs in. Analgesics, which are pain relievers, you can put those actually in the eye to help relieve some of that, some of the pain in there. Uveitis, if they have it a lot, that can also lead to glaucoma. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about glaucoma. So that could be just the disease itself. The dog or cat can have glaucoma, or it can be secondary to something else that they have going on. That intraocular pressure that we talked about in the aqueous humor, the anterior portion, that little portion of the fluid. Remember we talked about it having pressure. When that pressure builds up, for whatever reason, something gets blocked in there and it builds up, just think of your self or a balloon that you just keep blowing and blowing and blowing and it has nowhere to go. It has nowhere. We talked about how fluid has to be constantly moving through there. It's the pressure is going to build so bad that that eye can actually just basically blow up. Okay, you want pressure in there, but you don't want too much pressure in there. So if it does that, it can lead to what they call glaucoma. Okay, regardless of what caused it, if it's primary or secondary, it's going to cause some damage to the retina and the optic disc. Sometimes it can cause them to go blind. It is an extreme emergency condition. It's extremely painful. So most of the time these dogs are going to be presenting very, very painful. It happens more so in bulgy-eyed dogs. It happens in certain breeds, but you are going to see that acute glaucoma from the pressure. All right, that term on the bottom, enucleation, that's an important term, meaning that you're going to take the eye globe or the eyeball out. So when the glaucoma gets so bad that we cannot relieve the pressure with medications or anything like that, we are actually to relieve pressure and relieve pain for the dog. It's better to just take the eye out or enucleate it. Okay, and that's an example of the glaucoma there, pressure. And if you can imagine just that eyeball getting bigger and bigger, super painful. There is an instrument called a schweizometer or a tonopen that actually measures the pressure. And if anybody's gone to the eye doctor, they used to, I don't know if they do it anymore, when they blow that little air thing in your eye, they're checking the pressure in your eye to make sure it's the correct pressure it needs to be at. Okay. All right, so these are just links. These same links I do have on Canvas. So they're up under your student resources, and they'll have some things for you.
I have a question. I meant to ask you. So when I go to watch the lectures again, for some reason it is blurry, and then I'm trying to sign into my YouTube, and I do something on my computer. It won't it doesn't allow me to click to find your profile if I go on my YouTube.
My profile's unlisted, so you have to go directly from Canvas. You have to click on it directly from Canvas. It should take you right on there directly from Canvas. It doesn't take you directly there?
No, it'll make me sign in, but then I'm signed in, but then it won't take me right to your profile for some reason. I don't understand.
Well, and it won't because I'm unlisted. Let me try, I'll make it public today and see if that works for you. See if it works better for you. Okay, I'll make these two public and then try to go back on them tonight at some time, and then just tomorrow when we get on, just let me know if you were able to view these, and then I'll make the rest of them public.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you
yeah.
do me a quick favor and go 2 slides back? I didn't get the, I think it was that one right there.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll work on,
there we go.
I'll work on trying to get rid of that box. I have a Zoom guru that can kind of probably help me out with this. So we'll try to get rid of that box on there.
Well, it's
All right.
Let's say their orbit isn't completely closed, or no way that these eyes could swell as much as they do.
Because the orbit's not closed?
Right. It kind of allows more room for more swelling, I guess.
Right.
I guess
Right.
it's kind of
Right. Well, yeah, it could be. It could be a good thing. Yeah, but you still don't, the more pressure you have, like with glaucoma, if it's swelling, the more pressure you have in your eye, it does damage to the back of the eye. So the stuff you're not seeing is what it's doing, because it screws up the whole rest of the eye and the flow of the fluid that goes through the whole rest of the eye. So yeah, I guess if you think about it that way, but the pressure still shouldn't be there. And it'll eventually then detach.
Bad, but I'm saying at least their orbit is open.
Right, right. And then where the horses and stuff like that don't have that. All right, so if you have paper out, I want you guys to, we're gonna write this down really quick, just so you guys have this, so you have that pathway. Just as this is a cheat sheet, and I always do this because it seems to make it easier. It's in the book in this order, but just as a cheat sheet. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay, so number one, this is a visual pathway. This is all the way to the back of the eye. Number one is your cornea. That's anterior. Got 4 layers. Don't worry about the names of them.
You said cornea?
Cornea. That's the most anterior portion of your eye. The second part is going to be your anterior chamber. So if you're, as you're writing this down, kind of visualize it as you're looking right at the dog, all the way to the back of the eye. Okay, so cornea, 4 layers, anterior chamber. Your anterior chamber has the aqueous humor.
How do you spell that?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I'm trying to write it down because I'm really bad at that. Oh, you know what? I have to look it up because I'm really bad at spelling.
A-Q-U-E-O-U-S.
Thank you.
A-Q-U what?
E-O-U-S.
Thank you. All right, behind that chamber is the iris. And if you want to just put colored, that's your colored portion of the eye. So you remember that part. So cornea, anterior chamber, iris. And your iris is the one that opens and closes for your pupil. So your pupil's next. Cornea, anterior chamber, iris, pupil. And behind your pupil is your lens. So that's the one that helps you see near and far. And behind your lens is your posterior chamber. And that's the big part. It's a big round, that's what gives the eyeball its shape. And in there is vitreous humor. So same spelling as aqueous, you're just putting a V-I-T in front of it. Vitreous, V-A-T-R, vitreous humor. And again, these are all in your book too, but as far as spelling goes.
He says vitreous humor?
Vitreous with a T as in Tom.
Oh.
Vitreous, yeah.
And that's
So
in
cornea,
the posterior chamber?
yes, that's the fluid in the posterior chamber. That's what gives the shape to the eye.
You said vitreous
Humor.
humor.
Humor, yeah, both of them are humor at the end. That's just with the fluid, that's just the name of the fluid. And then number 7 is the retina. So right behind the posterior chamber is the retina. And that's where your images are formed.
So would the vitreous humor be number 6?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, and this kind of stays with number 7 because there's rods and cones that are within your retina. So like a 7A, your retina contains your rods and cones, and you remember your rods are sensitive to light. That's your black and white. And then your cones are detail and all the rest of the colors. And that's within the retina. Now, what also holds that together with the rods and cones is the choroid. So that would kind of be like your number 8, your choroid. That's a CH, choroid.
Ah.
So when you're looking for it in the book, and that choroid is also part of your uvula, or uvea, UVEA, uvea.
And that's in
So
the choroid?
That's it. Well, actually, yeah, the choroid is, the uvea is part, that choroid is the uvea. It's all within that. The uvea holds the choroid, basically.
How did you spell uvea?
UVEA.
Okay. I got it right.
Got it? All right. And now this, you can number this however you want, but this, or put an arrow that the tapetum nigrum and the tapetum lucidum are in the choroid. So it kind of all is together. So you have your uvea. Within the uvea is your choroid. Within the choroid is your tapetum nigrum and your tapetum lucidum. So usually when I draw this, I'll draw it out and I'll kind of draw them all with arrows and stuff like that. So you can rewrite this or whatever. However, I'm very visual. So when I learn, I have to write these all in charts. I have to write them all down with flows and arrows and so I can remember pathways because I remember,
Okay,
I just
so
remember stuff.
uvea, choroid, tapetum, what?
Nigrum, Nigrum.
Okay, and then the other one.
Lucidum, yeah. And remember, the lucidum is the one that animals have. That's the one that's that does the reflective. Yeah. All right, and then your last one, the very back, is going to be the sclera. That's the white part of the eye, the sclera. So when you're doing your pathway, when you're writing your story too, remember when it gets to that retina, the rods and the cones are going to communicate with the optic nerve and stuff like that to be able to send that up to the brain to send it back. So there's a little part in between. Just kind of remember, maybe write a note, visual pathway, rods and cones communicate. So they're going to have to communicate with some sensory things to go up to the brain to come back. And then you get that vision from there. So that's where all your kind of vision, that's where your vision pathway, but the pathway starts in the cornea and works its way down. But that's kind of your path you need to follow. Make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Good. All right. I'm going to stop this here. Stop the recording.